We are back at the joint fiscal committee. Thanks everyone for coming back from, I got some complaints that the break was too long, so we'll never take a break again. And we're gonna move, you think I'm kidding, but no, that actually happened.
We were just shocked that we had a break,
That's right. So next up, we're gonna do a housing update. This is sort of in line with the regular housing updates that we've had as part of joint fiscal since 2023. It's right there on the agenda. I don't have to remember. So we are going to start off with Commissioner Farrell from DHCD, and then we're going to move to AHS, to DCF, and then hear from the State Housing Authority and the Housing and Homelessness Alliance of Vermont. Oh, easy. I couldn't find you for a minute.
It's me either.
I sit in the back. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for having me. Nice to see everyone. I'm going to pull up a slide deck. I'll warn you, I gave you a lot of materials because I don't have much time, so I'm going to move quickly, but I'm going to refer to these materials for fun later reading. I'm sure you'll all dive in as soon as you. Okay. Am I being able to share?
Yeah, you should see it.
Okay. Try again. There we go. Great. Here we go. So
Sorry, 1 second. And Senator Lyons, I really won't notice you now, so please do speak up if you need to. Back to you.
thank you, Madam Chair. I'm going to move quickly because I don't think this group needs the broader context as to what has happened in the housing market. We had steady increases in the creation of housing units for several decades, and then starting in the late 80s, it plummeted. And so the last few decades, what we've seen is a dramatic decrease in the unit production. In the context of today's discussion, where we're being asked to speak more to the big A affordable housing, what that's done is it's put immense pressure on our affordable housing systems. We are fortunate to have a really strong affordable housing network and system here in Vermont, especially relative to other states. But unfortunately, what you're going to hear from Kathleen Berg later is that some of the federal actions are going to undermine some of that. A lot of our systems and programs are built upon the voucher, housing choice vouchers and project-based vouchers. One last point on the overall housing system. I've given you a copy of the executive summary of the Vermont Housing Needs Assessment. I'm not going to dive into that today, but at a high level, that says that we need to build between 24,000 and 36,000 units in the period that began this year and ends at the end of 2029. What you're seeing right now is a hypothetical scenario. If we keep roughly to the last 10 years increase in building permits, that we'd see a shortfall. If the low estimate turns out to be true, we'll see a shortfall of 9,300 units. If the upper estimate turns out to be true, we'll have a shortfall of over 21,000 units. So that's the overall picture that we're facing in Vermont.
And I just want to offer, I would say the emphasis is more importantly on little a affordable, because what matters is that people can afford to live in Vermont.
Mhm.
And capital A affordable is ridiculous shorthand, and he's like, capital A affordable matters because it is lowercase affordable forever, and that's why it matters. But we're just like, the conversation is to try to solve a problem, which is that people can't afford to live here.
That's great framing. Thank you, Madam Chair. And what I'll talk about today are a couple of programs, but I'll make a broader point, which is that programs and our investments can add, dozens and hundreds of units to our housing stock each year. What we need to do is reconfigure our systems altogether, our regulatory systems and our financing systems to enable thousands of new units a year. So I'm going to talk about really important programs today. You'll hear about other really important investments and programs, but to speak to the little a affordable, we need to think much bigger in terms of permitting, regulatory, and financing reforms. The two programs that I'll speak to regarding Act 81 of 2023, VHIP and MER, this group is very familiar with. VHIP, I'm just going to cover at a high level, but you've been given our full dashboard update in your packet, so you can flip through and see various iterations of VHIP. The shorthand that I'll give you is VHIP 1.0 is everything that was funded with ARPA dollars. VHIP 2.0 is when we started receiving state general funds, and so then more flexibility was built into the program in terms of forgivable loans, things like that. At a high level, we've continued to keep the cost per unit in terms of state investment down while keeping the property owner's investment fairly high, which is good. It's what we want to see. So over 1,100 units so far funded through VHIP. Since the inception of the program, it's an average of $39,000 per unit, but we're looking at more of a $44,000 average lately per unit. A couple of folks here have been able to see some of these units. And in many cases, most of these units have gone towards households exiting homelessness or at risk of experiencing homelessness. Those units in particular largely rely on housing choice vouchers. So again, you're going to hear more from Kathleen later, but that is a challenge that it's not going to reduce the number of units being created, but it's going to make it harder for the most vulnerable people to get into these units. I'm going to move on to FER. So this is a program that focuses on manufactured home communities, and it makes investments through three primary methods: home repairs, sometimes emergency home repairs, infill awards to make use of underutilized lots and improve those lots so that homes can be placed there within these mobile home communities, and then foundation awards. So when a home is being placed, we can help with that. You can see that it's had a pretty broad effect across the state. So 155 mobile home parks, like VHIP. Actually, I want to make another point on VHIP because MER and VHIP have a similar trend, which I think this group will really appreciate. The benefits tend to be inverse to our traditional economic benefits across the state. What I mean by that is if you look at Rutland County, the Northeast Kingdom, basically the areas that have seen economic atrophy, that's actually where VHIP is the most impactful and where the most units come from. Rutland County by far has been one of the success stories, as well as Caledonia County. A lot of that's driven by the city and town of Rutland and by St. Johnsbury. In some cases, communities have chosen to sort of double down on those investments. So we've seen tremendous success in some of our challenged neighborhoods and utilizing VHIP to help bring the neighborhood back. So it's not just about housing those folks, it's also about rehabbing a neighborhood that needs it. Same thing with MER, where manufactured homes that have been most neglected have actually benefited most from MER. I want to point to the home repair awards in terms of our strategy to keep people housed and prevent folks from falling into homelessness. The home repair awards act as an upstream mechanism to keep someone who's precariously housed in a unit that is falling into disrepair. The reason that's relevant is another handout that I've given you here. It's another section of the Vermont Housing Needs Assessment. If you all get a chance, you should try to read the full housing needs assessment. This speaks to why MER and VHIP are so important. Our housing stock is very old. We also have almost 20,000 homes with severe damage that needs to be repaired in order for folks to stay housed.
I would offer that I think everyone at this table understands the problem we're trying to solve. And what we're curious about is how far and fast are we getting to solving it?
Sure. I'd say both of these programs are extremely, the delivery is rapid. VHIP units are 6 to 8 months from grant agreement to lease up. MER, likewise, these are extremely quick investments. So you're.
And how does MER fit into the, I'm so sorry, I don't remember the acronym for the new thing that we created last summer.
Sure. So MHIP,
Thank you.
Okay, so two separate programs, but I had a feeling a question would come up today about MHIP. This has been an extremely rapidly moving effort to get folks into home ownership. 107 lots have been improved. I'm sorry, 96 have been approved, 107 have been identified. Those other 11 are very soon to be underway. By the end of the calendar year, it'll be 107. In terms of homes that have been purchased through that revolving fund mechanism, and again, VSHA has really been the lead on this in partnership with AOT, but 71 homes have been installed. 39 of those homes have already been sold or are under contract. of folks that have registered for the program. You can see the stats here, 84% are first-time homebuyers, 68% female, 53% are between 25 and 45, and 44% of these registrants have experienced homelessness. And you can also see the geographic distribution.
Madam Chair.
Oh, yeah.
I'm just wondering, as you go through this, Alex, Commissioner, I'm wondering about what the goal was, how much money was allocated, and how much money is out the door. Trying to figure out how much capacity is left. So I heard various things, and then the last question is how it intersects with like Efficiency Vermont, because some of their programs are very generous for refitting of otherwise vacant homes right now.
Yeah. As far as MHIP, it was $8 million that was awarded to undertake that effort. Kathleen might be better to tell you, but I believe $3 million of that went to VSHA to create sort of this revolving fund of purchases, and so that perpetuates itself. That as soon as the home is purchased is replenished. Of the $4 million that was sent to AOT for lot improvements, I know they are still improving lots and have not run up against any sort of issue, funding issue. And they haven't come up short in terms of funds to continue purchasing new units. So.
I have a bigger picture question. So I appreciate that you telling us about sort of the programs that your office feels directly responsible for. I see the role of government as one of convener and facilitator and being able to look at the whole of population outcomes, not just program outcomes.
Yeah.
And so I guess I sort of see it as you're one of the people holding the bag for the housing crisis and solutions in this state. And so I just wonder if you have anything to say about sort of progress and need in terms of the whole of the state and the whole of government.
Sure. What I'd say is we have a long way to go because some of the reforms that are needed are truly structural. We have started to take steps to improve, say, Act 250 and wetlands permitting, but those are continuing to drive costs up. We're not only seeing units reduced in projects because of some of our permitting processes, but we're also seeing the remaining units, the cost being driven up. So this chart shows that, we're making progress towards what we need to be producing at, but this shows that we really have very far to go. And the reason I restricted today's to the Act 81 of 2023 is that's what I was told to present on, but I appreciate the opportunity to make sort of this broader point that I think, as you indicate, Madam Chair, we can't look to these programs and these investments as the solution for housing. We can't think that that's going to check the box. These are going to round out the gaps in the market. And I think of VHIP, VHCB, LIHTC as the opportunity to sort of round out those errors in the market. But I think we're doing ourselves a disservice by not undertaking broader permitting and regulatory reform.
And so what are you doing to bring the whole of the state, and I'm not permitting reform, but the whole of the state, all of the partners focused on this, all of the private developers focused on this, all together to be looking across the state and to be filling gaps?
Yeah, I appreciate that. So
like your convening power, I guess, is part of what I'm wondering about.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd say two bodies that are convening regularly. One is undertaking an effort right now to look at our regulatory systems, and the other is housing leadership team, which meets bi-weekly, but often ends up meeting weekly, which is across state agencies that the leadership coordinate to propose internal systems improvement. And that often includes consulting with private developers. So what we have done is assess permits for projects that have been permitted. What did that process look like? How long did it take? How many units did they lose along the way? And so that gives us a retrospective into what we could have done if we had taken certain actions sooner. As far as the second group that I referred to, this is the permit modernization work that has been established by the governor's recent executive order. And this is essentially mandating that at a cabinet level, and then including experts from across all agencies, we start to put together proposals, not just what can the administration do without sort of requiring legislative action, but what can we propose to the legislature to make building homes easier and faster? And then if I can. I'll just
And more
speak
affordable.
more affordably. Yeah, I mean, so that's where we drive costs up, is we reduce the number of units that can happen in a project. We increase holding costs, we delay the project. That's how costs get driven up. And so those are the levers we have at the state level. You know, some of the broader financing issues, I think we're sometimes at the mercy of what the federal government does, and we need to mitigate that as much as possible. Another effort that is really important to us is expanding who is building homes. So, you know, one of the benefits of VHIP is that it can go to any property owner who wants to get into affordable housing development. It's, you know, really created a new path for folks to become affordable housing developers. To double down on that effort, we've undertaken a 3-part initiative, the Homes for All initiative. Some of you may be familiar with this. The first part, we've already published a toolkit. In 2023, we published our Homes for All toolkit, which basically walked through the whole process, how someone would become a small scale developer for want-to-be developers. That generated a tremendous amount of interest, which we're leveraging in parts 2 and 3 now. Part 2 is a training program where we're bringing in a vendor that's going to literally do hands-on training. So teach folks who want to become developers, and we're coordinating with the Land Access Opportunity Board on reaching emerging and new developers to train them up and help capitalize them. The third part will be, we're working, kind of taking from the Sears catalog formula. We're working with a vendor to create actual designs that will be open source designs for any small scale developer to use, that are going to be ADU up to 4 units. So it's going to be, you know, aimed at infill, small scale infill that's attainable for a new developer. Those open source designs not only benefit these small developers because now they don't have to create their own designs, it also gives municipalities the opportunity to do by right approval. So just zoning, a zoning permit without development review.
Yeah, Representative.
Okay, so thank you for this, Alex. And I'm sorry, I was talking to Adam out in the other room, so I missed the beginning. But I think the other thing that we don't talk about enough is what's happening in communities with regard to NIMBYism.
Yeah.
So the town of Greensboro has multiple times voted against putting housing in a vacant building that's their town hall to have apartments upstairs. The town or city of Westford has voted down infrastructure improvements that would have allowed for additional houses. In Plainfield, just last week, was it? I've lost track of weeks. They voted down $600,000, which was a contingent upon getting a $10 million grant to build houses out of the flood zone. In my community, we voted hooray on a 250 unit project Stonecrop. And now people are up in arms about a 16-unit apartment building because now there might be 16 more cars and we're going to have traffic problems. So, and those are the ones I know about, and I don't have any sense of what's going on across the whole state, but that's an issue that we're dealing with too. So I get that you like to talk about barriers with permitting and regulations, but what we're also seeing is the people of Vermont voting against housing projects. And so do you think about that? And do you have thoughts about how we change that? Do we change who makes the decisions? That's a lot of that has to do with local control. And some places, wasn't it New York City just yesterday voted on something where they put control at a higher level, and now they're going to have 14,000 homes in Long Island City or something like that. So talk a little bit about that issue.
You'll have to pardon my shorthand. When I refer to by right zoning and by right approval, that's really a piece of that strategy. So there's two ways to go out at NIMBYism, right? It's sort of win the hearts and minds of the people through education. And that's a serious thing that we want to undertake. And I can come back later and share some efforts that we're working on with VHFA and ADS to explain how some of the numbers work on housing development. The other is, to your point, Representative Shai, is where can we change the levers for approval? Where can we change where folks can weigh in? And some of what we want to do with by right zoning is to say all of the public input happens at the plan stage. Once a municipal plan or once zoning is adopted, you no longer have a chance to interfere or weigh in. You may not even have a chance to appeal. Development review does not take place. And so this 802 homes effort that I referred to, which is the third phase of our Homes for All.
Yep.
That's the goal is eventually make that statewide, that if you choose from one of these 10 designs, the development review board, the neighbors, they don't get to stop it because they've been pre-approved up front. We all agree these are designs. You just go get your zoning approval and you
And the zoning would be sort of infill in communities, not creating sprawl.
That's exactly right.
Representative Wood and then Senator Lyons and then Senator Perchlik, and then we are going to move on to our next witness.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for the information and the updates. I have a couple of questions. I'll make them brief. How many, what kind of tracking does your department do with regard to the loss for available rentals because of the conversion to short-term rentals? And how is that part of your strategy? So, it seems like we could actually turn over very quickly if we were incentivizing people to return to regular rentals from the short-term rental, and actually then also help to enrich our communities as well.
Yeah, so the data that we have suggested about of the roughly 12,000 units that are rented through short-term rental, about 7,000 of those could theoretically be suitable for long-term residency. And what I would say is by trying to give folks incentives like VHIP to go this route, we have created thousands of units or hundreds of units that rather than going the route of short-term rental, they're instead choosing to make these not only long-term rental, but affordable rentals. So offering incentives like that to property owners has been one mechanism. The broader context of short.
Theoretically, these are units that don't need to be renovated in order to be rented because they're already being.
Yeah, I think the broader context around short-term rentals is that there are a lot of considerations beyond just a unit and a certain use. So I think the heart of your question is, are we going to propose any sort of restrictions on how property owner choose to use their property? That's not on the table right now. I think what we're trying to create are more pathways for more units to be created so that there isn't the same sense of scarcity. Really, the scarcity is what's undercutting our ability to keep enough sort of primary residences online.
Yeah, well, I mean, 7,000 units is 7,000 units. And theoretically, 7,000 units that we could convert with, some effort, but not the kind of effort even, or the kind of money that would necessarily be required in VHIP. So I'm urging us to be thinking about short-term rentals. And, there's a nearby community, right, close by that there's only 20% of homeowners that are year-round residents. It's a issue. We can't just kind of keep being blind to it.
Yeah, it's relevant, and I think the numbers work out. So that statewide, it's about 3% of the housing stock yeah, so 12,000 units roughly works out to be about 3.5%. I think what we really want to focus on is where, because there are some communities like Reb Kimball's community, for example, is one where that's actually a higher percent. There are a handful of communities where, yes, the community needs or like 10, 12% of their housing stock. That's short-term rentals, sometimes even more, as you Rep Wood. So there's not a clean statewide solution, in part because a lot of those communities haven't enabled other lodging. And so it's become more lucrative to do short-term rental than it has long-term rental. I think that is a problem we'd like to address, but there are a few different ways to go at that. How can you?
Yeah, I'm not suggesting that there's any one way to do it, but to not be thinking about that as part of what we need to be addressing when we're addressing the housing crunches, I think short-sighted on our part.
Yeah, and
I'm gonna just have to let that.
That's it.
yeah.
Senator Lyons.
Thank you. And actually, a number of the comments I was going to make have been mentioned. Just going back to the NIMBY factor, people are truly afraid of seeing their small towns turn into some of the changes that we've seen in Chittenden County. They don't want to see the large apartment buildings, and they don't want to see the retail centers going up, because it will change the character of our local towns. One of the things missing from Act 250, and Alex, you're talking about zoning and other changes. One of the things that happens with looking at Act 250 is that there is no statewide plan for how we utilize our land and how we develop our land. And if we start thinking about a plan idiosyncratically, one place at a time, it won't be fully integrated. So that's the broader issue that I see. But there are other limiting factors in housing construction and development. And can you just mention a little bit about the availability of workforce to do what is needed? I mean, you've projected out, thousands of housing units needed by X time. I don't know that we have the people to do that build out. So maybe you could talk a little bit about that limiting factor and perhaps some others.
I'm concerned that we have opened the door to trying to solve the entire housing development problem in a 10-minute time slot on this agenda. And so I guess I would just sort of, if possible.
I'm fine with letting that be a rhetorical question.
Thank you, Senator Lyons. I appreciate that very much. Sorry to do that to you, Senator Perchlik.
If I'm right, are we looking at a statewide solution or trying to do that by town?
Statewide.
So you'd be proposing legislation this next session?
As far as statewide, I'll just point to the future land use mapping. That is actually the statewide effort to undertake a direction as to where housing should and should not be built. And so the future land use mapping is an effort that's underway now. So we won't get into it, but I'll just point to that. But the housing targets, you can see a lot of data in your appendices which inform that. So I can't go into any of that today. So happy to come back and dive into maybe the full picture of housing strategies.
Appreciate that. Thank you. And I appreciate all the backup materials you gave.
Of course.
They're going to be worth diving into. Thank you very much for your time.
Yes, thank you.
Next up, we've had Department of Children and Families. You're back. Welcome back. I think you had a new liaison to like legislative scheduling. And so I hope that all the communication worked out for sort of what testimony we were talking about today.
We're about to
Oh,
find
yeah.
out. If not, and I'm happy, I was gonna say, I'll just kind of skim over. I know that we're short on time. And I know if others to hear from, that isn't.
And like the number of people sleeping in the streets was pretty important. So, yes.
Absolutely. Yes. So the, going through the slide deck, there is a monthly report that DCF is responsible to submit. The latest one was posted on November 4th. And then I also included just trying to give you the most up-to-date information that I'm able to share with you. It really is more about who we're housing in hotels and motels right now. So as you were saying, those that we have sleeping outside, that isn't necessarily information that I have on hand. But certainly I'm happy to see. I mean, I think that's part of the problem is that we don't necessarily have a way of tracking that. We tried many times to count. So this, that's slide 3, just kind of gives you how many people we're housing. This doesn't include those that are self-paying, right? We always have some portion of the population that we're housing. They have income and they have to pay for a certain number of days. So that number is a little bit short. It doesn't include them. The slide 4 shows you really the eligibility categories. Those haven't changed. Really kind of the how many people in what categories hasn't changed either. with the most being those that are disabled, followed by those with families, with children. Tell me if I'm going. I was trying, I think one of the things that had been asked, so we have some coordinated entry information, kind of how many people have been assessed on slide 5.
I just want to offer on slide 4, I think there's still like significant misunderstandings from the public about the really remarkably narrow group of folks that are eligible to be housed in the motels right now.
There does seem to be a misunderstanding and even as we're approaching the winter months, right, trying to explain just because there was a shift last winter or through the law before. So trying to educate, always happy to direct people to me. I'm happy to share with folks who that is and who it is not.
So someone might qualify on 2 different categories?
Yes.
Okay, so this is just the primary category. Okay.
Oh, thank you. The disabled 201 GVR, is that the self or the doctor certifies, but you don't qualify necessarily for SSI? Is that the one we did?
Medical professional.
Medical professional. Okay, thank you.
And I know you don't have a total count of folks who are sleeping rough or in a shelter. But do you have any sense of how many folks in these eligibility categories are not eligible for the motels? So like folks who are over 65 that have been evicted from the motels, or folks who have experienced domestic violence who have been evicted from the motel.
So those that have already used their 80 days, right? We do see there is a natural flow of people that are coming in and out. And that is because the 80 days is on a rolling calendar year. So we have had people, right, that are newly eligible, they're coming back in, and then we have some that have exited. I don't have exact numbers. I mean, I think that is one of the challenges, right? Like everybody wants to know, like, where do people go when they leave motels? And that's not necessarily something that we have. It could be that the case managers out in the community do and have some of that information. I think, right? There is no one big database that tells everyone, where did Miranda Gray, where is she now? And I think that's one of the challenges that we see here.
Representative Harrison.
Yeah, Miranda, I'm trying to cross-check between 3 and 4. You have your category 798. That doesn't match up with the 800 room. Is it 798 individuals or households? Why doesn't it match the number of rooms?
So this is households, and I think I just misspoke that the 823 rooms, that isn't. Some households are bigger and need more than one. Accounts.
Okay. So the 790 households. Thank you.
Okay. Excuse me. I believe there was some question about who's engaged in coordinated entry. That is slide 6, and just kind of the flow in and out there. Again, not necessarily something that I oversee per se, but wanted to who's engaged with coordinated entry, right? So rules do say that people need to engage with that, but I don't necessarily know who's flowing in and out.
If you don't, this is honestly an innocent question. If you don't oversee coordinated entry, who does?
So OEO through contracted partners, right? We have the 2 balance of state.
Yes.
Right, like, so they enter in, it remains.
And what department does OEO sit in?
Department, right.
Okay.
I don't, as the deputy commissioner,
Okay.
Economic Services Division.
Okay.
But yes, right, like, so yes. DCF. Just-
And I'm not trying to be difficult. I don't understand how we solve a problem unless we understand the problem to some degree. And so I'm just like searching for ownership. So.
Understood. Yep.
Oh,
Yeah. I'm still trying to make the connection. We're building affordable housing as fast as we can. We have homeless people. Who or how is that connection made between, I had a friend who was homeless for several years with 2 children. she was never in any way directed towards the housing that I thought we were building for her. And I think that's who makes that connection. I mean, it's like, we know they're in the motel program, but we don't know where they go when they're not there. Does anybody know where they go?
If they stay connected to their case manager through coordinated entry, right? So coordinated entry is the avenue to get connected, but not everyone, just, we don't have enough units for the amount of people that we are seeing.
That was a perfect lead into your next slide.
That being slide 7 or that being slide 8? You skipped it. Okay, slide 7.
7 or 8.
So this, the 6 is just talking about those engaged in coordinated entry. And just kind of, so like people come in and some people find housing on their own without engaging in coordinated entry. There's that. And then also where people are exiting. So when we are able to capture it, you know, are they going into temporary housing, permanent housing, homeless situations? And so that is a website that is linked there for folks to be able to look at. So maybe slightly, like better news, right? We have been able to add some more shelter capacity. We know that it isn't enough. It is the same issue. Representative Shai had mentioned, right? NIMBYism, it's not necessarily easy to be able to bring on shelters in places, but we have been making steady gains. And sorry, Director Sojourner would be presenting this, but she had a conflict today. And so we do have, like, in this, we also have some more coming online, both this month and in December. So Memorial Community House is going to run the family shelter in Waterbury. So that is great. CVOEO is opening their seasonal capacity at Champlain Peaks, and that's another 26 beds. Groundwork Collaborative is opening another shelter with 6 beds. Cots, I believe this one just happened, if I'm remembering correctly. That's 20 beds, and then the Upper Valley even is going to be adding some more beds as well. Sorry.
Sorry, no, I'm deciding when I'm supposed to ask my question.
I'm trying to give you a chance to finish the sentence.
So, and then we have some more capacity that will come on between January and February. So in Rutland, we've been working really closely with them to be able to bring on some more beds. That would be 10. We have a family shelter that's going to be, they've been moving into a new location. That will be 7 to 8 households. And then the Good Samaritan Haven will open their new adult shelter here in Montpelier, and that's 17 beds. And then just one other point that I wanted to share was the extreme cold weather. This is a new approach this year. And so we put out a notice for funding in the spring to try to have one entity that would be coordinating all this. The shelters will operate on a night-to-night basis. It is weather dependent. The new activation level is 10 degrees. I will note that we got feedback last week and are taking that into consideration, having some conversations to see what makes sense. So thank you. And then it's the Vermont Interfaith Action who is providing this coordination for us. And so we're really appreciative of that and hoping that they will be able to help us. We're anticipating about 4 or 5 places to be able to assist with being able to open up these extreme cold weather shelters. Slide 12 gives you an estimated capacity and where. So a project in Bennington, probably one in Burlington, Newport, Rutland, and then 2 projects in Barre and Montpelier, 1 in Brattleboro. So an estimated capacity of just over 200 beds.
I appreciate that the shelter capacity growth year-round is labeled shelter capacity growth, but that's not true. In Windham County, for instance, we have lost shelter capacity significantly over those years. And so the story is not the same in every community. And as I've done some of the math with community partners around the cold weather, temporary, what is it called? The extreme cold weather shelter. the cost of a bed per night when it's so haphazard by the weather and so limited is actually much higher than if they were running a shelter for every night. So I think as we sort of test out these new mechanisms, I think it's important to make sure we're maximizing resources as well as the incredibly difficult experience that folks are going through.
Absolutely, and noted, and I think sometimes it's what communities have to offer. For some, it's the church basement, and so that isn't something that can happen routinely, but certainly conversations that we should keep having.
Yeah, and church basements have happened routinely in Vermont in the winter for as long as I've lived in Vermont. So I'm not sure why we've suddenly eliminated it as an option. It's certainly better than the street when it's, 0 degrees out. I think you had a question.
I did, back on
Sorry.
page 7, the coordinated entry exit destination by region. So all those orange numbers are people who exit coordinated entry and go into homelessness.
Right, so, for example, and I don't want to use this example, but I'm going to because it's a reality, right? Someone could be staying in a hotel, but they haven't been able to arrange something else. But if you've used your 80 days and it's not in the winter season, then you could be exiting into homelessness. Right, so I think it's,
So they lose coordinated entry services at the same time
you could still engage with your case manager. I think it's trying to capture, where are people when they're connected. Some people we will lose in contact with, right? Not having a routine place that we know where to find each other will be a challenge.
Okay.
Thank you. So I don't really have a question because we've been through this in my committee, but I just, I think people need to understand that we have 5,000 people who are homeless and that number is growing in the state. And we still don't, we have piecemeal approach. And I thank you for your question, Chair Kornheiser, around, well, like, who's responsible? So it's in a couple of different places and then it's the community, but I think we still do not have a systemic response. We have bits and pieces of different things and, a few more shelter beds here and a new initiative there. I don't want to discount the fact that, we will have literally thousands of people who will be not in those spaces during the winter.
Thank you. Folks, I got a little ahead of myself with how very much on schedule we are. And now we are very much behind schedule. And so I'm going to thank you both for your testimony.
Thank you.
And invite Kathleen Burke up. And offer that we're going to run past 12 today. Just by a bit. And like I said, we'll never take a break again. I'm so sorry that I did that.
Just make it 10 minutes.
Good morning.
Good morning, thank you.
This morning. I apologize. I did share last minute updated presentation at the end of the day yesterday with some updated data that I was able to obtain yesterday. So folks haven't had a chance to see that or pull it down. I do have copies with me if that would be helpful.
Oh, we're good. We're good.
You're good. Okay. As I walk through my testimony, I would encourage folks to refer to this spreadsheet of data, which I think will be very helpful for you to just understand the conversation.
Can I get a copy of that, please?
Sorry, it
I'm
is
not
really
sure
hard.
everybody got it, or I'm just not finding it.
And a nice big spreadsheet. It's lovely.
Is it posted?
Yeah,
Okay,
it's out in the packet.
okay, that's, thank you. Thanks for bringing it.
One more.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you. So again, I'm the executive director of the Vermont State Housing Authority. My name is Kathleen Burke. I'm here today representing collectively not only the Vermont State Housing Authority, but all public housing authorities throughout Vermont. And my testimony this morning is gonna focus on the status of the Housing Choice Voucher Program for the state of Vermont. So I'll begin by saying Vermont's rental assistance system is facing a preventable crisis. Without immediate state intervention, hundreds of families will lose their homes this winter, and the state will forfeit millions in future federal housing funds. I'm going to be bold because it's a crisis. We're requesting a one-time general fund appropriation of up to $10 million to stabilize Vermont's housing choice voucher program and prevent a collapse in federal rental assistance statewide. If approved, this appropriation would seek to restore housing leasing rates at January 1, 2025 levels. And again, I'm going to sort of refer you back to the spreadsheet as I'm going through this presentation. This investment is not a bailout. It's a strategic bridge that protects Vermont's most vulnerable residents, safeguards federal funding streams, and strengthens the fiscal base of local housing authorities for years to come. The problem: federal shortfalls, local consequences. Federal underfunding of the Housing Choice Voucher Program has left Vermont's housing authorities in a fiscal emergency. As of December 2025, there will be a $1.2 million shortfall in housing assistance payments that are due landlords to benefit households. Unfunded vouchers to date, and this is a systemic problem that has gone on for years based on how Congress funds the Housing Choice Voucher Program nationally, but collectively, Vermont has over 1,000 unfunded vouchers based on how that funding of the voucher program occurs. Loss this year is a minimum of 131, and that number is growing. Vouchers leased on the 1st of January, 2025, collectively for the state of Vermont was 8,272 vouchers. Those are households or about 16,000 individuals. Without intervention, PHAs will be forced to terminate active vouchers, leaving families without assistance and further reducing future renewal funding from HUD. The downward spiral is clear. Each lost voucher today means a smaller federal allocation tomorrow. Meanwhile, proposed 2026 congressional appropriations are projected to further reduce Vermont's voucher allocation by up to 600 households, affecting as many as 1,200 Vermonters. Why state action now matters. Vermont's housing choice vouchers are an essential part of our affordable housing ecosystem. Each voucher represents not just a family with a stable home, but a leveraged investment in Vermont's housing infrastructure. A one-time $10 million allocation will prevent voucher terminations and avoid immediate displacement of families, stabilize federal renewal calculations by maintaining unit months leasing levels used by HUD to determine our 2027 funding. Protect housing authority solvency, and ensuring state staff retention and continued program administration. Leverage long-term federal dollars. Each state dollar today preserves future federal funds that would otherwise be permanently lost. Fiscal strategy, a one-time grid investment. Public housing authorities can receive funds from outside resources to fund agency shortfalls. Collectively, we estimate that 4 public housing authorities have a shortfall in housing assistance payments due in December. This shortfall is estimated to be approximately $1.2 million. However, using UMP, which is an acronym for unrestricted net position, it's the public housing authorities earned administrative fees from prior years. Without reimbursement, risks operational insolvency. We propose a dollar for dollar state reimbursement for UMP deployed to sustain voucher payments through 2026. This ensures PHAs can continue leasing without layoffs or cuts or service cuts. The state's investment immediately translates into retained federal dollars. Vermont's voucher renewal base increases, reducing the need for future state intervention. While the estimated maximum needed to fully stabilize the program, again, based on our January 2025 leasing, the start of the calendar year, is between $7.5 and $10 million. We believe the actual draw may be lower depending on available UMP or unrestricted net position. Again, those administrative fees that public housing authorities can use to support housing assistance payments. An expanded investment of up to $18 million would fully fund all authorized vouchers, but could require ongoing appropriations from the state to support. The stakes for Vermont. This is not an abstract funding gap. It's a human and economic emergency. Each lost voucher represents a family displaced or forced into homelessness, a rental unit removed from Vermont's affordable housing supply, a permanent loss of federal funds tied to that voucher. Since inception, over 1,200 vouchers have already been lost due to inadequate federal appropriations. Without action, this loss will accelerate in 2026 and beyond. Our recommendation, we urge the Joint Fiscal Committee to authorize a one-time general fund appropriation up to $10 million to Vermont's public housing authorities, agreeing to reimburse public housing authorities for any use of unrestricted net position deployed to maintain leasing levels through 2026. Ensure federal renewal maximum by stabilizing the state's voucher base heading into fiscal year 2027. This investment protects Vermont's families, preserves millions in federal funds, and demonstrates fiscal and moral leadership in safeguarding the state's affordable housing safety net. Again, I'm going to close by recommending an immediate authorization of a one-time general fund appropriation of up to $10 million to Vermont public housing authorities to stabilize the Housing Choice Voucher Program based on January 1, 2025 leasing levels.
Thank you very much. I appreciate all the details. The Joint Fiscal Committee doesn't authorize appropriations and isn't able to. The General Assembly can through budget adjustment or budget, or once we're back in session. And the Emergency Board can occasionally make emergency appropriations in the interim, or it's really a transfer. And so it would help. Is this funding that's needed before January 1st or funding that's needed after January 1st or after February 1st, really?
Well, ideally, the funding would be received before January 1st.
Okay.
Public housing authorities have agreed to fill the shortfall of the $1.2 million using other resources that are available to them to prevent the termination of families from the program in December because of this issue. But again, doing so, it requires that they use agency earned administrative fees, which is just not something that public housing authorities can do to sustain, to be able to sustain operations.
Absolutely.
Full time.
Thank you. Representative Parsons?
So quickly on that point, we would prefer to have the money before January 1, but if that's not possible, does the roof fall?
We're not going to allow the roof to fall on January 1. The public housing authorities are going to step in and they're going to cover their respective shortfalls in housing assistance payments. But I need to emphasize, whatever the right venue is for moving this forward to seek approval for appropriation, I need to impress upon the committee and all that as we enter a new calendar year for January 1, the housing choice voucher programs across the state will be over enrolled.
Mhm.
Okay? And so without immediate action or action early in the calendar year, public housing authorities are going to be forced to continue to shelve vouchers, take vouchers offline and not reissue those.
Which, as we heard in earlier testimony, is a threat to sort of the use of VHIP, to all of our sort of
Our
more stable,
investments in
affordable housing.
housing that we're making, exactly.
And am I remembering right that the chair of your board is Commissioner Farrell?
He is.
Okay, thank you. Yes, Representative Shea.
So I'm not sure where the 10 million comes from, because I see on your spreadsheet, you have 7.5 million. If you add up the confirmed shortfalls for FY 25 and then the support funding in FY 26 to the leasing, that comes out to 7.6 million. So I don't know where the
It's up
10 million.
to 10 million. And on the spreadsheet, I indicate the appropriation request is between 7.5.
Right, I see that, but I don't know what the other
So-
2.5 million.
Well, because this is a fluid situation. We're winding down, we're closing out our calendar year funding. The government has been shut down for 44 days. They're back open today. Have not had the ability to have any kind of conversation or interaction with our colleagues at Housing and Urban Development. I was fortunate to be able to have a meeting with the help of Senator Sanders' office with a deputy secretary at Housing and Urban Development yesterday. And he painted a very bleak picture of housing and urban development. Typically, HUD, Housing and Urban Development, would step in. They would have funds available to assist housing authorities that are in a shortfall situation for the year, allocating additional funds needed, again, to prevent the termination of families from the program. They don't have any more appropriation to step in and provide that, okay? And he also cautioned, and these are his words, we're very, very concerned about fiscal year 26. So again, the General Assembly has never made a contribution to this Section 8 Housing Choice Voucher Program to leverage the resource to ensure that our renewal funding is the best that it can be for future years. I'm here today to call this issue out because not only is it going to prevent our ability to move families out of homelessness, it's going to prevent our ability to keep families that are currently housed. It's going to prevent our ability to make those investments in affordable housing that VHCD, that VHFA and others rely on. That is the situation.
Increased homelessness and fewer people getting out of homelessness. Have you talked to the administration to request something in budget adjustment?
I talked to the administration in early summer, and they cautioned that it would be something for the legislature to consider, that it wasn't an issue for the emergency board.
Right, but there's budget adjustment, which.
I understand, but
So I didn't know if you had talked to them about that as well, this.
I'm talking to a lot of folks about that, and budget adjustment may be the way to go. But again, I have to caution, be part of this strategy with keeping families housed that are currently housed on January 1 allows us to receive the most renewal funding in 2027 that we can. If we receive money in, I don't know, February, March, and then housing authorities are having to get that money out the door, you're not going to realize the investment of that until spring or summer.
Okay, thank you.
Can I just ask one?
Absolutely.
So I've heard this twice and read the materials, and what I'm trying to figure out, we already know that in 2025 that we were underfunded for the number of households that we had in our caseload already. And that's carrying forward into 2026. And so this supposed one-time investment supposedly help us for our 2027 allocation. And what I don't get is you seem to present a certainty that that will happen. So this one-time investment, I guess what I'm putting out there is that it may not be a one-time investment. It may end up being something that we either have to terminate or continue in some level. And that's the part I'm struggling with, because we don't have any guarantees about what the feds are going to
I mean, we
allocate.
don't know what we don't know. We don't know what the appropriations bill is going to be
Yeah.
in calendar year 26. But what we do know is that there is a strategy for building our base for this year, for 2026. And building that base means keeping families enrolled in the program. And if we're not building that base, if we're exiting families from the program, then it's playing havoc with our renewal eligibility for fiscal year 27.
Yeah, I get all of
So
that.
that is, but I don't have a crystal ball.
Right.
The glass is half full from my lens. And so I hope, for the best. The Housing Choice Voucher Program has always been a bipartisan program. But you're right, there are no certainties. And, there is a worst case scenario that, there could be a 40% cut to the Housing Choice Voucher Program for fiscal year 26. We don't know.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Sarah, hi. Feel free to drag whichever chair suits your seating needs. And I've done a little bit of agenda rearranging. We're tackling a lot of very really urgent emergencies today. And so the background growth calculation conversation, we're going to bump to next month, if and when we meet next month. And I imagine the fiscal officer's report can also be trimmed quite much. So
For 5
Anyway.
minutes.
yeah,
I'll do my best to be brief and
no,
add.
this is,
All right.
yeah, you're talking about,
Sarah Phillips,
Cool.
I'm here as the board chair for the Housing and Homelessness Alliance of Vermont. Thanks for having us. We represent over 60 organizations and individuals across Vermont that are committed to Vermont, where everyone has a safe, stable place to call home and homelessness is solved. The Housing and Homelessness Alliance of Vermont I'm also joined by Michael Redmond, the soon retiring executive director of the Upper Valley Haven, which provides food, shelter, services, and housing. And soon to be the interim executive director of the Housing and Homelessness Alliance of Vermont. I'll try to leave a couple minutes at the end for Michael. The Alliance also administers the Balance of State Continuum of Care funding, which supports 12 local housing coalitions that coordinate Vermont's housing crisis response system. And with just 3 staff, we also work to support collaboration and build a Vermont where the fundamental right to housing is enjoyed by all. We are definitely at an inflection point. I think it's heard all morning. Maybe not unlike, as some of my colleagues remember, in the 1980s. I don't remember because I was much younger then, but as I've been told, when there was drastic federal housing cutbacks and federal withdrawal from the responsibility for housing people with low incomes. And at that time, Vermont actually created the Vermont Housing and Conservation Board. It's notable to say that we did some good things in that time period, and we helped pioneer the creation of permanent affordable housing. And I think the question before us now is, what will we do in this moment? So you've seen some data. The current housing production needs are pretty significant. At the Housing and Homelessness Alliance of Vermont, we focus on issues of housing equity. So I want to point out some particular numbers. And I want to, with that in mind, if we just focus on the need of housing units affordable for low-income Vermonters, that number is 15,000 by 2030. The National Low-Income Housing Council also estimates a shortage of 11,000 rental homes affordable and available to those with extremely low incomes. In addition, there were 4,000 people experiencing homelessness in September. As you saw from the GA data, there were 800 households homeless and in motels through GA at the end of October. I want to point out, we saw the data that a quarter of those were families with children. We know that that program does not meet the entire need. We've seen a more than 60% increase in unsheltered homelessness in the past year.
pretty significant. I think we all see that and recognize that. Our shelter and service providers also report and have data to back it up that the severity of health needs is increasing and more complex than ever, including mental health, substance use disorder, and physical health. All of those have increased. The effect is a much greater intensity of need than can be met by our shelter system alone. Let's remember that. And it is increasing strain on an already strained system. I'll stop being doom and gloom, and I'll point out a few things that feel hopeful and good. Despite those challenges, our members, and we have many, have seen significant positive impact of the historic investments that you all have made in recent years. So thank you. Those investments are important and they see the impact. They have not been wasted. It has been accounted for, and we have made historic progress in some ways. That doesn't mean that the needs aren't big, but let's celebrate some successes along the way. Since 2020, the Vermont Housing Conservation Board invested more than $409 million, which has leveraged more than $742 million in other funding. That's created single-family homes, almost 2,500 permanently affordable rental units, more than 300 new housing units for farm workers, 10 new shelters, expanded capacity of 14 others, adding more than 300 beds. That's net beds growth. For recovery residences and much more. So good things are happening. Those investments do work. They make a difference. More than 37% of newly leased units in our affordable housing network are leased to people experiencing homelessness. And since January, over 1,800 people have exited homelessness into permanent housing. You saw the data that was from 1 month, but that's 1,800 people that have left homelessness into permanent housing since. So we have some challenges, right? Because at the federal level, these housing investments have historically fallen into three key areas, those three legs of the stool: rent, capital, and services. The federal government for nearly 2 decades has provided some consensus and important policy framework on how we address housing for low-income people and how we coordinate to solve homelessness. And that is changing drastically. So you've heard from Kathleen on the loss of public housing authority vouchers. The cost of keeping people housed is far, far outweighed by the immediate and the long-term financial and social impact of inevitable eviction. So let's be really clear about that. Whether it's one time or not, the impacts will be significant. In addition, I think Kathleen mentioned this, but I just want to point out the importance of project-based vouchers that come from those housing authorities in terms of playing a critical role for us leveraging the low-income housing tax credit to provide deep affordability and ensuring that our investments can reach and serve people who are exiting homelessness, and that our state dollars go as far and deep as possible. New program and policy requirements that are across the board hitting many of our agencies regarding immigration and legal status verification are undermining housing stability for a lot of people. I think that hasn't been mentioned this morning, and it needs to be. And then finally, there are deep and big housing cuts to homeless assistance programs that are coming. There was an article, I believe, in the New York Times today that made an even more alarming suggestion at the size of those cuts and big policy shifts in the federal government in terms of how they approach homelessness and our homeless response, and they will undermine our response. The HUD Continuum of Care program brings in about 1.2 million annually into Chittenden County and 6.5 million into what is called the balanced state, the rest of the state. It funds coordination of our homeless crisis response system and several projects that include street outreach services and permanent housing for households exiting homelessness. That COC funding is competitive by design, but generally performing projects are renewed. We are expecting, and this is an update from what I even put in my written testimony, we're expecting that as much as 70% of those projects will not be renewed. And projects that are gender inclusive or use evidence-informed housing first principles are going to be on the chopping block for sure. So there's sort of big policy shifts. I need to add, because I'm speaking on behalf of our membership as well, that state level policy solutions to homelessness in recent years have often felt reactive, stopgap, very last minute, and sometimes short term. And while well-intentioned, that can inadvertently re-traumatize people who are experiencing homelessness. So we can and should make improvements to our housing crisis response system. I agree with that. Those changes do need to include the input of people who are doing the work and people experiencing housing instability. Change for change's sake is not going to solve the greater challenges that we're trying to address. And to many, that can feel like rearranging chairs on a Titanic. So I want us to be careful of that and depleting the limited capacity of the network that sometimes doesn't gain much impact. We do have a housing crisis response system. We sometimes do not have the leadership. In housing development, much attention has also been brought to regulatory reform, infrastructure investments, and building more housing at large. Indeed, we are not arguing that those are part of a broader solution. We do need more supply. At the Housing and Homeless Alliance of Vermont, though, we do not believe in trickle-down housing. We do not believe that simply building more housing will get us out of the problem, and that addressing the housing shortage for Vermonters with the lowest incomes and solving homelessness requires much more than regulatory change and supply side solutions. It requires ongoing financial investments in all three legs of the stool: capital, rent, and services. And we need to continue to invest in solutions that make housing affordable for Vermonters with the lowest incomes. So as you look ahead to the legislative session, we want to urge you to continue, and many of you follow these guiding principles already, but I want to name them explicitly because our membership believes in them very, very strongly. That we need you to continue to implement policies and make investments that maximize or minimize the negative impact of Vermonters with the least and maximize the benefits for those same groups. That is housing justice and housing equity. We need you to continue to be long-term in your thinking. These problems were not created overnight and they will not be solved overnight. So stay the course. Sometimes the cost for some of what we do is upfront very big. Yes, it is big upfront costs, but sometimes the benefits are reaped over the long term. And when you look at the costs over the long term, the benefits for families and communities pay off. And don't give up on what has been proven to work. We need the will to keep making those good investments in organizations like the Vermont Housing Conservation Board. So we do want you to prioritize preventing unsheltered homelessness. That is forefront of our minds. Ensure adequate funding for our emergency shelters in GA. Please do support the request for public housing authorities. I might name that perhaps there's an opportunity to not use the BAA, which is sometimes mired down in other issues, and perhaps do a single purpose special bill to move forward the request early in the session. Addressing the shortfalls and preventing the loss of housing is really important. It's a good use of one-time funds. And if we can make those investments quickly in 26, you heard from Kathleen that we could preserve public housing authority funding in the future. Let's be clear. We will pay one way or the other as a state. Either we will pay through healthcare, human services budgets, perhaps even corrections budgets later on, or we will pay now to keep people housed and the impact on those households and staying houses. We need to invest in permanent affordable housing to keep building homes for Vermonters and supporting vibrant communities across Vermont. And we need to preserve and where possible expand permanent supportive housing programs despite the federal policy shifts that says that we should not do that. We should do permanent supportive housing to integrate services with rental systems. So we're really grateful for our past partnership at the Housing and Homelessness Alliance with all of you. And we look forward to continuing to working with you in the coming session and support your good decision-making. And I think that I left 1 minute at least for my colleague, Michael, to add a few thoughts.
Thank you very much, Sarah. I've had the pleasure of working with Sarah over my 7 years in different, where she was at OEO, as the director there, managing up grants, which the Haven participates in, provide services through our shelters and other work, and through Kathleen work on VSHA, through permanent supported housing, and lining up both the housing vouchers for rent assistance, as well as the services that help chronic homeless people remain housed. I also want to point out the good work of the legislature. It was only 2 years ago in the S-100, the Home Act 2023, that changed some significant zoning laws in the state to require that to add shelters, emergency shelters, to the list of types of construction that cannot be just denied based on the fact that they are a shelter. And this summer, we will be opening a shelter that had previously been denied by the town of Hartford, but then we brought it back after that bill had passed. Thank you, Teresa. And it was approved, and so we'll be adding 20 beds this summer, as well as a resource center in this building, because that's where we help people connect with them where they are and help them secure permanent housing. Over the last year, the Haven has helped 111 people enter into permanent housing. And where do they come from? They come from our shelters, They come from living outside under bridges. They come from the motel program, through the services that we have in outreach. And 30 of those went into a project that we worked in partnership with our low-income housing provider, Twin Pines Housing, that under a program that's sponsored by BHSA called Away Home, that targeted chronic homeless and provided services. And today, those people are living inside, whereas before they were in other circumstances. What you do makes a difference. We have to stay the course. We have some really choppy waters ahead based on what we're reading about what's happening in the federal government. But you can make a difference. Housing first is something you're going to hear about. And when people ask you about it, does it work? You can say, yes, it does. And we hear about that all the time through the work that is funded through the organizations like the Haven. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you both.
The construction project's coming along well.
You can drive by and see it's going up. Thank you.
I remember.
Oh, no, so yes, please, I didn't see
Okay.
anyone's hands.
Well, I didn't, and then I wasn't
Yeah,
going to,
go
and
for it.
now I am. I'm looking at the coordinated entry data, and I know HHAB, does the balance of state. There's a lot of people in the data, at least that's shown, that return to homelessness from permanent housing. And is there, what kind of, follow along, what kind of case management is kind of trying to ascertain like why that's happening? Because obviously it's easier to keep people housed than it is to try to rehouse them again.
Yeah, the complexity of the people and when they're chronic homeless, and by definition means they have some form of disability, which can be health condition, but often it's mental health, it's physical health. The age of the people that we're seeing is now well over 40 as the average age of someone coming into a shelter, many in their 60s, 70s, and even 80s. Never imagined that life. And so the mental health challenges, the addiction histories, and just the living outside over long periods of time makes it challenging. And we're trying to piece this together. It is great to have a caseworker who can be there Monday to Friday to connect with people, but it's not enough. And we don't have the other coordination of other services that are really needed to make the difference. People are going to fail, in that if you say, they didn't keep up on their rent or they became a bad tenant. But the thing is that the relationships that we have in other organizations, we allow that to happen and then we stay with them and we can tell stories of the people who get rehoused as well, even if they failed once.
Mm-hmm. And I guess what AHS, continually points out is that there's, massive collaboration among the departments and, I just see people falling through the cracks left and right. And so if there's that kind of coordination,
Mental health would be good.
It doesn't seem systemic, yeah. And at Dale with older Vermonters, we had a case down in Brattleboro that seems endemic of what I've seen in other places. So, okay, thank you.
I just want to emphasize, I do think in those cases, right, the needs are greater than one housing retention case manager, right? And it is that coordination of services.
Yeah.
Westman.
I want to thank you for bringing up the mental health issue and the other people in our community. I personally know 3 people that want to remain homeless, and their issues are mental health and addiction. And that alone, just mentioning housing, will not solve this problem.
No, absolutely. And we say when they're ready, they're ready.
It's the first time today we've heard anybody mention.
And you can't afford, I'll say the position of the current federal administration to say we're going to force people to go through rehabilitation. That is not going to work. When people are ready, they're ready. And we've had a lot of people cycle in out of being living outside into shelter, back outside into shelter. But it's through those connections and then allowing them to line up services, particularly even if they're in shelter, they have some stability in their life. And that we can then point to people that were in that position that you said, but now have moved past that into more permanent housing and are doing well.
Thanks. Thank you both.
Thank you.
So following on the impacts of federal action, we are going to hear from our refugee and resettlement organizations. That chair can come back, whoever just put it away. If Director Leah and Director Gray want to come up together, that would be great. Thank you very much, Pete. Oh.
Well, we're going to, that's okay.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm sorry. I don't think we've met, so I didn't know who you are. Welcome. All the chairs.
To the Zoom, I didn't want to do that.
Yep, thank you. And we are running a bit behind schedule, and I'm sorry about that. And so if people do leave during their testimony, it is not because it is not valued. It's because of my bad time management, and I'm sorry about that. And so I think there are probably a lot of unbelievably pressing issues to the communities that you all serve. I think because we're the Joint Fiscal Committee, we're like exquisitely focused on the loss of access to SNAP and sort of what the impacts of that look like and what you're doing about it and what you think should be done about that.
Okay.
We're gonna go to like 12:15, 12:20. Success.
Sorry, the photo.
Yeah, that's not a good one to leave with.
Thank you. Just so much.
Okay.
Yep, there's nothing. You can move that as far as you want because it is a non-existent microphone. Yep, it's just enough space. The prop. Floor is yours.
Good morning. I think it's still morning. Thank you again for having us. My name is Molly Gray. I serve as the Executive Director of the Vermont Afghan Alliance. I'm here with Joe from ECDC in Southern Vermont and Sonali from USCRI in Colchester. We do not lobby. And this is Matt Thompson, also from USCRI. None of our organizations, certainly not the BAA, we do not lobby. We are a nonpartisan organization and we are apolitical. We are here today because you asked, and thank you for that opportunity. Our goal for today is to answer 3 questions. First, to provide you a brief update on where this complicated, confusing, ongoing conversation is going, is happening around SNAP ending for refugees, asylees, and special immigrant visa holders. We will use some terms today, and we will try to explain them at the front because it's a lot of immigration categories that we are deep in the weeds of every single day, but they're also very, very important in understanding the impact. So bear with us. Second, we'll talk about the impact. And third, and most importantly, we do have recommendations for the committee, as you would expect. Okay. I first want to just do a little bit of table setting and make sure everyone on the committee knows about in particular, the Afghan population in Vermont. It's one of the largest populations of Afghan refugees in the country, as you probably know. And just to note that this population is a little bit different because the United States made them refugees, right? So these are individuals who risked their lives in service to the US military and diplomatic mission in Afghanistan. The small dots, stars on the map, those are all the communities where Afghan refugees are living today. I don't have Woodstock on there, but I know there's a growing population in the Woodstock-Hartford area. Joe will probably talk a little bit about Springfield, but Vermont looks different now and is going to look very, very different in the next 10 years. And we're multiple organizations. We are 3, but there are other community-based organizations across the state supporting this growing community. I really want to highlight that the benefit to Vermont's tax base and to the nation's tax base is far, far more than this community has received. It's estimated that 1.97 billion in local, state and federal taxes, and including contributions to Medicaid and Social Security, have been made by this community since 2021. Or since between 2019 and 2023. We started as an organization really in 2023. We helped with driver's licenses. We helped 52 members of the community obtain their Vermont driver's license, including Afghan women who would never have the chance to drive in Afghanistan. We've had to inform them the stop sign is not optional here. But workforce, job placement, housing access, immigration, legal services, together with the colleagues sitting next to me. A little bit about the population that's really going to get at the heart of our discussion today. Since March and the end of the U.S. refugee admissions program, we used available funds to support 15 new arrivals. So even though most refugees are not permitted to come to the United States, Afghans still are, Afghan special immigrant visa holders, but without any support. They have to find someone to pay for their flights. And when they get here, it's not through the State Department. It's because our organizations are figuring out other ways to continue to grow our workforce, to continue to welcome this community. Additionally, there are those individuals who were evacuated in August of 2021. I'm sure everyone remembers those 2-week period where the U.S. Helped evacuate 125,000 people. And those are the men in that picture all served alongside the U.S. military. Their wives and kids are still in hiding in Afghanistan today, 4.5 years later. And we know that they have to be able to get here in order for resettlement really to finish. So the evacuation story is far from done. So a little bit about where we're at. Before Trump took office, when a refugee, a special immigrant visa holder, an asylee coming through humanitarian parole arrived, they received SNAP benefits up until the point that they were employed and no longer economically, financially eligible, right? And then they also, after becoming a legal permanent resident, were allowed to stay on SNAP, right? They were just treated basically like anybody else. Then we had the OBBBA, all sorts of names for it. We're just going to call it HR1, right? That happened over the summer. And HR1 said refugees, asylees, people who arrive before they become a legal permanent resident, their SNAP is gone. Their food assistance is gone. So anyone coming to the US today, a special immigrant visa holder, their SNAP is done. But the question is, after they become a legal permanent resident, what happens? And that's really sort of the crux of the challenge. I want to just explain a little bit more. When we say legal permanent resident, that means a green card holder, right? You're permitted to stay in the United States. You're a few steps away from being able to apply for citizenship. Refugees are individuals, this is like the legal, I'm going to nerd out on the legal terms, but it's really important that you all know this. So a refugee, 1 year after being in the US, can become a legal permanent resident, a green card holder. So that's the timeline when now where there's no SNAP benefit available. And we have individuals in the state who are still waiting to become legal permanent residents who have now lost SNAP, even though refugees aren't coming into the US anymore. Then we have asylees. So those are people who also face persecution, who are allowed to come into the US through a program called humanitarian parole. The US government said, we're not going to ask you to make a case to us now. We're going to allow you to come in, Venezuelans, Ukrainians, Afghans, and then you're going to apply for asylum. And then eventually you'll adjust to legal permanent resident status. Individuals who aren't legal permanent residents yet, asylees, they have now lost SNAP, including many families right here in Montpelier. Then there's special immigrant visa.
I appreciate all the detail.
You want me to?
And we have not so many minutes.
Okay. So we have special immigrant visa holders, those who work for the US government. They have now lost SNAP, even though they are legal permanent residents the moment they arrive here. So, the state of Vermont has said, well, we're going to continue SNAP for refugees and asylees who have legal permanent resident status, but we're not going to continue SNAP for special immigrant visa holders. So now we have this category of people in Vermont who have lost SNAP. And there's a lot of confusion around what to do about that. We still believe, and you have memos from immigration legal experts nationally who have said that Vermont's determination may be incorrect. And also Vermont did things early, too early. They started taking people off SNAP in September before waiting for USDA guidance, before waiting for recertification. So I'm going to continue to move forward and get to, I think, what is the most important point for today, and that is the recommendations. I think that's where the committee wants me to go. First, I think it's extremely important right now that while these legal issues need to be resolved, and I can really get into the meat of that if you would like during questions, it's so important that there isn't an othering of one class of Vermonters. And that if Vermont as a state decides to welcome people, that we don't say, oh, well, you don't get food assistance anymore. And that the state needs to make that position extremely clear, because ultimately, when it's not clear, our organizations, we feel it. For the first time, we've started receiving mail about immigrants being a drain in our system, when we know they're already working second shift, they're growing our workforce, they're filling jobs across the state. So this is our ask today. First, if it is possible, if it is legally possible, to re-enroll those who were removed, asylees, refugees, and special immigrant visa holders onto SNAP, and do so using state dollars. So the issue with the feds is gone around the error rate, if that's possible. Second, just establish another program. And I'm not sure what you would call it, but to allow people still to keep their EBT card, a SNAP-like program that Vermont has for this group, or just make direct payments to bank accounts. Third, and this is our least favorable option, fund refugee organizations, the USCRI and ECDC, to administer a SNAP-like benefit. But that does put a tremendous amount of stress on our organization, and it really perpetuates this othering that unfortunately we've now seen in a very, very stark and frankly, I think an unconscionable way here in Vermont. I will now yield the floor to my colleague from ECDC.
So thank you, everyone. Thank you for inviting me. My name is Joe Weir, the director of ECDC, and I was here 2 weeks ago to speak on behalf of hundreds of refugees that we resettled in Southern Vermont, both Brattleboro, Bennington, Springfield. Before I continue, I also want to thank the committee here because I think your support in the past in transitional housing also helped us and also led to one of the lowest outbound migration of refugees because of the transitional housing before we move people into permanent housing. So we just want to thank you on that. My colleague Molly spoke about, give us a broader piece of it, but I just want to put a more face to things that people were talking about here. So I'll begin with the background. We all know that ECDC is one of the 10 refugees resettlement agencies in the country. And in Vermont, we are 2 recognized by the Department of State, USCRI and ECDC, to resettle refugees in Vermont. And since we started resettling refugees in Vermont, in Southern Vermont in particular, we have resettled over 500 refugees in Brattleboro, Bennington, and now Springfield.
Director, I'm sorry.
Okay.
And I think we're going to need to let everyone sort of catch up with each of your organizations in our own time and ask you to cut to the chase around specific things about food access that we should know.
All right, so,
And one thing that I might even prompt you with as a question is we heard about a distribution of funds from the our refugee office and it didn't seem, I'm curious how the distribution of those funds has worked out and if it has seemed sufficient to you.
thank you.
Yeah.
All right, so let me go down to the the gist of it is that for refugees resettlement, the impact of the loss of SNAP for refugees right now, for ECDC, in South Vermont alone, just going down, we're talking about 125 refugees plus 45 SIVs, which is special immigrant visa holders. And those are people who arrived in recent times, and because of the recent bill that was passed, that do not have access to full benefit right now. And I want to let me give you a story of someone we're working with right now who recently arrived. And her name is, I put her name as NB, which is not her real name. NB is 62 years old widow who holds a special immigrant visa, whose life bears a testament to both extraordinary courage and imaginable loss. NB worked for USAID in Afghanistan. In that capacity, she served American interests with dedication and tremendous personal risk. For her association with the United States government, she paid the ultimate price. Before her very eyes, her son was killed when the Taliban took over. A life, extinguished brutally because she chose to work for the US government, because she believed in the mission, because she trusted the American government, that the American government would stand with her. On September 8th, NB arrived in South Vermont. She came bearing not only the scars of trauma, but the weight of profound grief and displacement. At 62 years old, she found herself in an unfamiliar land without family, with limited English proficiency, and struggling with severe trauma, and no human being should have endured such thing. We immediately applied for food stamps for NB. It was a basic need that she needed, the most fundamental form of support, but she couldn't get it because of the time she arrived. Her application was denied, was not approved, because according to ESD at the time, they were issuing termination letters. NB case fell through the cracks as a result of federal policy change. She never received food stamps, and none of $1 assistance has reached this widow who sacrificed everything for our interest. Her per capita fund, which is the $1,650 that we receive from the federal government, is still pending. And the process is still slow because as people come in now, we have to submit your application to the Department of State, and then they go through your file before they approve you. And it has been taking a long time. And this is a story, the human story of NB, and there are hundreds and thousands, hundreds and hundreds of refugees that we are working with across South Vermont. And we work with refugees from Venezuela, Nicaragua, Nigeria, Congo, Eritrea, South Sudan, and the list goes on. And Afghanistan, of course, is the largest population we have. And so as this committee, with your help, the recommendation from Mali and recognizing your time here, we support those recommendations along with other recommendations that people have given prior to this hearing. Thank you so much for your time. And thank you for having me here.
Thank you. My name is Sonali Samarasinghe. I'm the director of USCRI Vermont. USCRI has been operating in Vermont for over 45 years. And in that time, we have settled over 8,500 refugees. I want to just build on what my colleagues have said and come up with 3 points. One is that in response to HR1, Vermont became one of the first states to implement federal SNAP rule changes on October 1. Consider that even before the federal government issued guidance, Chairperson, Vermont decided to interpret the law to end a lifeline for many humanitarian immigrant families. After the federal guidance was finally announced on October 31, policy experts analyzed the guidance and said that humanitarian immigrants should not be subject to the 5-year bar. Other states have followed that interpretation to keep families on SNAP, yet Vermont appears to be subjecting humanitarian immigrants to a 5-year waiting period. SNAP is a lifeline for new Vermonters, but it also acts as a bridge. It's temporary. It's assistance that it is temporary assistance provided by the state, while agencies like ours help them reach self-sufficiency. And we have a 92% rate of clients reaching self-sufficiency and employment within 4 to 8 months of their arrival. I have a story, but I know time is short. So I'm going to go to my next point, which is that SNAP is also very important because it's a prerequisite for other benefits to open up. So it unlocks access to community resources and events such as farmers markets, crop crash, and even fee waivers for things like GED, SATs, and SAT exams, and for college applications. And if families are always focused entirely on meeting basic needs, and I understand this applies to everyone, but there is a higher burden for refugees to adapt because it's harder for them to adapt. They don't know English. So it's harder for them to focus on learning English, participate in community events, and become more involved in neighborhood and local schools if their burden is always thinking of, am I going to feed my family or am I going to have a roof above my head? I have provided budgets, and I'm not going to go into that now again because of time, but I want to say they earn about between $17 and $22 an hour, which is far below the living wage. And the math simply doesn't work because if you have 2 full-time earners, refugee families with more than 2 children struggle to meet basic needs. I endorse my colleagues' recommendations. I want to specifically address the question you raised, Chairperson, which is about the money that we received. It was received by USCRI and ECDC. We got 106,000. And it was an off-ramp procedure, and it was on a ramp down basis, which means over 4 months, we identified 46 families who were most vulnerable according to a uniform formula. The formula was, when did you arrive? Do you have a SNAP letter to prove that you had SNAP and that it was lost? So we had to have that letter. The third was, is there a pregnancy? Are you employed? What is the employability rate? All of those, but it was uniform, it was a formula, and we sent this out, not only ECDC and us, but we sent it to VAA, to ALV, all the other refugee agencies, including asylum seeker organizations. This is Matt Thompson. He's our program manager for refugee services. He's worked in that position for 17 years. He has a knowledge of it. And so, yeah, we sent it to Nickerson.
Yeah, so wide net to try to identify the most vulnerable families because we knew the benefits would not stretch very far.
Yeah, and the benefits we thought would stretch 4 months on a ramp down. So we will have that time. The 4 months, we would have to work intensely with these families to provide them maybe more employment and find childcare and things like that.
And so I just want to clarify, so the dollar amount that you were sent was a little bit more than a month's worth of benefits that you were then trying to stretch across 4 months to an extended population.
Right, and
can I just clarify one other thing? That Vermont essentially has disqualified this population when some other states have not made that decision. in this moment.
Yes.
And that the need for the food stamps is about, the need for stability that comes from food stamps differently from, say, food shelves or ad hoc charity, creates a stability that allows folks to really integrate into the community and build their lives here.
Exactly that, yes.
But I want to add something to, sorry, is that the eligibility of the grant we got from the states is only for those who lost their food stamp benefit and not those who have not
Arrived.
or those who arrived after October 1. Yeah. So all those after October 1 are not qualified for that.
Thank you.
And I think it's so deeply important to underscore that this happened before USDA guidance came, before any recertification process. And this idea that you would wind down a mother who already is working second shift with kids who's here on her own, or a larger family, when we know there are families across the state that fit that same category you don't wind people down from food assistance in some cases, right? But there are also others who are arriving, as Joe has said, who within a couple of months are already in a job and already self-sufficient. But it's just that othering is so unbelievable because for them, nothing has changed. SNAP tomorrow will come back for everybody else, but for them, nothing has changed. And there's so much we can't do, but on this, I believe there's a lot that can be done.
And they have to wait 5 years before they can be eligible for SNAP. And that seems.
That's a long time.
It's a long time, and by that time, they may be over income in any case. They need it now.
And I must say too, though, if we go with the 5 years eligibility, all those who resettled in Southern Vermont would not be qualified for food stamps. Because we started resettling refugees in Southern Vermont 4 years ago.
Thank you.
I just want to make a point that the House Human Services Committee, after hearing testimony and reviewing information, did send a letter recommending to, it's a non-binding vote, obviously, but our committee voted on it 8-1-1 and sent a letter to the Department for Children and Families urging them to reinstate SNAP benefits and or in the alternative provide state-funded benefits.
Thank you. Thank you all very much. Thank you for your long drive. Thank you for all the work that all of you are doing and have been doing for a long time. Yeah.
Thank you too.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Catherine, do you have a final word for us?
No, I.
Okay, great.
Okay.
I encourage folks to please read Catherine's memo, and thank you all for being here for quite an intense meeting.